Chapter 7. Carter. "We're going on that?" April asked, as he led her to his BMW motorcycle. He was pleased to see she had dressed appropriately in jeans and a jacket, even though it was warm outside currently, and the awe in her voice puffed out his chest. He didn't often take his motorcycle for dates, but April seemed adventurous enough to enjoy it, and he knew that most women had a soft spot for motorcycles and the men who rode them.
"Yep, I thought we'd live a little dangerously tonight before we take that walk. Have you ever ridden before?"
April shook her head as her eyes roved over the bike again. "Once, a long time ago in college, but I'm not sure it really counts as it was just around the campus circle. I don't think we even went above 10 miles an hour. Carter smiled and held out his extra helmet to her.
"Well, we shall remedy that tonight."
April chewed on her bottom lip for just a moment before grinning and grabbing the helmet. "Let's do it." He straddled the bike first and then held it steady for her to climb up behind him. When she was situated and her arms were wrapped around his waist, he fired the bike up and headed for the Riverwalk. Not only would a stroll along the river be romantic, but there were quite a few eateries out there to grab food as well. Though he couldn't carry on a conversation with her, Carter felt in tune with April as he sped through the city streets. Her arms around his waist sent a warm tingling through his body that both enervated and unnerved him. It had been a long time since he'd wanted a second date with a woman, and even longer since he'd looked forward to one. Hopefully, that didn't mean he was going soft. Jay would never let him hear the end of it if he was. "That was a rush," April said, a few minutes later when he finally killed the engine of the bike.
"Glad you liked it."
He held out his hand for her helmet and placed it in one saddlebag before putting his own helmet in the other. "Liked it? I loved it. How long have you been riding?" She ran her fingers through her long hair to return some of the body the helmet had stolen, and Carter had to force himself to focus on her question and not the gorgeous locks he wanted to touch.
Since I was 18. At first I got into it because it seemed like a rebellious thing to do. Then I realized I just liked riding. There's something freeing about it."
"I'll say." She paused and bit her lip, and he could tell there was a deeper question burning on her mind. "Why were you trying to be rebellious? Was it just a teenage thing?" His lip twitched. He could understand her curiosity. She was adventurous and fun, but even adventurous women had a limit on bad behavior, and she wanted to know what to expect. He just wasn't sure he was ready to spill everything. He held out his hand to her, hoping they could walk and talk at the same time. She took it, and he headed for the river.
"Well, I told you my dad worked a lot when I was younger. I think part of me was trying to get his attention, and another part of me was just mad at him."
"That's understandable. I'm sorry you felt that way. Does he pay more attention now that you're a pro player?"
Carter shrugged. "Some, I guess. He watches the games on TV, but he's only been to one in person."
"That's awful. Does your mother come?" She tilted her head towards him, her eyes wide and bright, soaking in his every word. And there it was. He had known the question would surface eventually. Normally, he would just change the subject and move on, but there was something about April, and he found that he didn't mind sharing.
"My mom has never been to one of my games. She left us when I was 12.
April's free hand flew to her mouth, and her eyes widened in sympathy. "Oh, Carter, I'm so sorry."
"Thanks, but it's been a long time. I'm over it."
Or at least that's what he told himself.
"But I didn't invite you out here to talk about my mother."
"No?" Her voice took on a flirtatious edge as she batted her eyes at him. "What did you invite me out here for then?"
"To show you the river, of course, and because we didn't get to take our walk last time."
She tilted her head at him and smirked. You do know I've lived here for a while and seen the river before, right?
Not with me.
Carter flashed her a cocky grin, to which she chuckled and shook her head. But he saw the smile tug at her lips as well. They walked in a comfortable silence until they reached the riverfront. I've always loved this place, April said. It feels like a place where old things can get washed away to make room for new stuff.
Carter lifted a brow. You sound an awful lot like Jefferson there. I thought you didn't buy into that religious stuff.
Oh, I don't, but some of what Lucia talks about makes sense. We all make mistakes. She has to apologize to some unknown being when she does. I just have to decide to either learn from my mistake and grow, or let them define me.
What mistakes could you possibly be making? You seem pretty well adjusted.
April took a deep breath and chewed on her lip. I think I might be making one right now.
With me?
He tried to hide the pause in his step by quickening his strides. Though he hadn't wanted anything long-term with her, the fact that she was already thinking these 2 dates were a mistake was a blow to his ego. She shook her head. No, maybe, but only time will tell in that area. But I was talking about my job.
I thought you loved your job.
I do. It's just that I've been thinking about expanding. I found this great place the other day, and I want to sign on it. But Lucia's words are circling in my head. She wants me to think about it more and make sure I can cover the costs if anything happens, or if I can't get someone to rent out one of the rooms. Carter didn't know Lucia well, and she had always seemed nice when he spoke to her. But at the moment, he was irritated that she would dash April's dreams.
You know what? It's okay to be cautious, but it's also okay to take chances. No one ever got ahead by sitting on the sidelines.
Her eyes brightened, and she smiled up at him. You're right. Would you like to see the space? I don't have a key, but I could show you the outside.
I'd love that, but can we grab some food first? My stomach is telling me that it's high time to eat.
April chuckled. Of course it is. Well, I certainly don't want you to starve. Do you feel up to the hot dog palace? He paused and lifted a brow at April. The hot dog palace had amazing hot dogs, but most women wouldn't want to eat there on a date, nor did most of the women he'd dated even eat hot dogs.
You eat hot dogs?
April shrugged and smiled. Not often, but that place is my guilty pleasure. Plus, I'll work it off later.
A woman after my own heart. Come on.
After finishing their hot dogs and strolling a little longer along the river, Carter and April headed back to the motorcycle. She gave him the address and the nearby streets, and he pointed the bike in that direction. When they arrived at the office space, he parked it and turned off the engine.
This is it?
He asked as they dismounted. Yeah, don't you think it would be great? The location is good, and there are 3 office rooms, so I could rent out 2 to help cover the lease. Though Carter didn't know much about owning a business, he could see the light in April's eyes when she talked about it.
I think it would be exactly what you want it to be.
She turned to him with a smile on her face. I think I'm going to take it.
I think you should.
The silence hung in the air between them for a moment, and Carter once again felt the urge to kiss her. He wanted to know what it would be like, how her lips would feel against his. But the voice in his head, one that he rarely listened to, cautioned him again to take it slow. Why was he listening to it now? But he knew that answer too. There was something about April. Something he didn't want to ruin by moving too quickly. Still, a kiss was nothing really, just a baby step in a direction to something much deeper. And suddenly he wanted to take that baby step more than anything. He took a step toward her, relishing in the desire that flooded her eyes. She wanted him to kiss her, which only made the process more exciting. His hands circled her waist, pulling her to him, and her face tilted up to his. He scanned her face, drawing out the moment and smiling as her lips parted and she inched closer. Finally, when the tension between them was thick and palpable, he closed the distance between them and placed his lips on hers. Her hands wound around his neck, and a feeling of pure happiness flooded him. He generally tolerated kissing because he knew women got more out of it. But for the first time, he began to understand the desire behind it. And then the realization that he might be in trouble flooded his brain.